History does not always destroy civilizations with fire. Sometimes, it simply waits for them to refuse humility. Every era faced moments where survival demanded bending. Learning from others, admitting weakness, letting go of pride, and again, humanity chose ego. This is not a list of defeats. This is a list of warnings, moments when survival was still possible. But arrogance made collapse inevitable. Stay till the end because the final warning is no longer history. It is happening now. Warning 10. Norse Greenland. When Vikings refused to learn from the Inuit, the Vikings who settled Greenland believed themselves superior. European, Christian, civilized. The Inuit were seen as primitive. When the climate cooled during the Little Ice Age, survival required adaptation: seals, kayaks, fur clothing, igloos. The Inuit mastered all of it. The Norse refused. They clung to cattle farming in frozen land. They rejected Inuit tools. They rejected Inuit knowledge. Pride whispered, "We are not them." By the 1400s, the Norse vanished. The Inuit remained. Lesson: survival doesn't reward identity, it rewards adaptation. Present parallel: modern societies dismiss indigenous knowledge in climate resilience. Future question: when systems fail, will we still ask who knows best? Or who looks like us? Warning 9. The British Empire in Afghanistan. Arrogance meets the mountains. The British arrived with maps, uniforms, and confidence. Afghanistan demanded humility, terrain knowledge, tribal dynamics, patience. They ignored all three. Columns marched into ambushes. Treaties were signed, then misunderstood. Locals were treated as obstacles, not allies. In 1842, nearly an entire British force was annihilated retreating from Kabul. Empires broke against Afghan mountains not because Afghans were stronger, but because outsiders refused to listen. Present parallel: foreign interventions still fail where cultural humility is absent. Future question: can power ever replace understanding? Warning 8. French Algeria. Civilizing mission or colonial ego? France believed Algeria needed France. Language replaced identity. Culture replaced memory. Resistance was labeled backwardness. Instead of humility, France doubled down with repression. The result: one of the bloodiest decolonization wars in history. Over 1 million dead. A nation traumatized. An empire humiliated. Lesson: you cannot save a people while refusing to respect them. Present parallel: nation-building projects that ignore identity still collapse. Future question: is modernization just domination wearing a new name? Warning 7. Vietnam. When superpower pride refused to retreat, early advisors warned escalation would fail. Vietnam required humility, history, nationalism, patience. America chose ego. Each defeat was reframed as progress. Each warning labeled pessimism. Millions died. Trust collapsed. A superpower learned too late that force cannot replace legitimacy. Present parallel: modern wars still escalate to avoid looking weak. Future question: how many lives does pride cost before withdrawal becomes acceptable? Warning 6. Soviet Afghanistan. The graveyard reopens. The Soviets believed ideology guaranteed victory. They dismissed Afghan society as feudal. Religion is obsolete. Resistance is temporary. They were wrong. 10 years later, the Soviet Union itself began collapsing. Afghanistan didn't defeat the USSR militarily. It exposed its inflexibility. Lesson: rigid systems shatter when reality refuses to obey ideology. Present parallel: authoritarian systems still ignore local realities. Future question: can centralized power survive a decentralized world? Warning 5. Japan's surrender delay honor before survival. Even after Hiroshima, even after Nagasaki, many leaders argued surrender would dishonor the nation. Pride delayed peace. Civilians paid the price. Only when the emperor intervened did humility override ego. Lesson: honor without compassion becomes cruelty. Present parallel: nations still prolong wars to preserve image. Future question: when does dignity become destruction? Warning 4. Ottoman resistance to reform tradition versus survival. The Ottomans knew reform was necessary. But humility required admitting decline. Each reform was delayed, each warning politicized, each innovation resisted by pride. Europe modernized. The empire stagnated, eventually collapsed. Present parallel: institutions today resist reform until failure forces it. Future question: can legacy systems evolve or only fall? Warning 3. Corporate denial when profit overruled truth. From tobacco to oil to tech. Warnings were known. Data existed. Executives chose denial. Short-term image over long-term survival. Billions lost. Lives damaged. Trust destroyed. Lesson: ego in boardrooms can be as deadly as ego in war rooms. Present parallel: AI, climate, biotech risks are being delayed the same way. Future question: who pays when denial finally collapses? Warning 2. Leaders who refused to resign, nations held hostage by pride. History is full of leaders who stayed too long. Each believed stepping down meant weakness. Instability followed. Institutions decayed. Violence erupted. Sometimes one resignation could have saved millions. Present parallel: political ego still paralyzes nations. Future question: will future leadership value humility or immortality? Warning 1. Humanity versus the environment, the final test. The planet has warned us. Again, and again, and again. Climate change doesn't require dominance, it requires humility. We continue to extract, continue to deny, continue to delay. This time, there is no retreat, no surrender document, no empire to blame, only consequences. Final question: when survival demands humility, will humanity finally bend or break? If history has ever whispered to you, share this episode. Because ego thrives in silence, and warnings only work when they're heard.